Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Along with me, as always, is Mike. Hope everybody's doing good this week. Today, for our What's in the Stack, Mike and I are going to tackle a topic that's important to me and him at the top, and then we'll go through our respective stacks. Mike, we're going to talk today about a topic that's near and dear to both of our hearts, and that is about comic book companies, especially Marvel and DC, obviously, seemingly leaving behind children as their audience or putting out content that seems to massively alienate any young children who would be fans of these characters. Now, obviously, are some alternatives for kids, but those are few and far between. You've got what's that Spidey and his amazing friends that is very, very preschool appropriate, I guess. I think they're doing an Iron Man kind of variation of that too. I think there's a Batman show called Bat Wheels with like the cars have personalities. But that golden kind of period of like 6 years old to maybe 10 years old, right? When things really become kind of entrenched is your favorite thing. I know for me, that was the age that Batman became like my favorite character and stuck through, right? Mike, I know you've talked about like Star Trek being in that area where it hit you. It doesn't seem like we make stuff for them anymore. We look at some of the recent things that have been released. Spider-Man, this cartoon, I think I'm trying to remember Spider-Man freshman year, or something like that. It was supposed to be, or Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, maybe. It was supposed to be an MCU prequel. They decided not to do that. It's now a Disney Plus streaming cartoon. In the trailer alone, I believe there were 2 or 3 curse words in there, which instantly, for a Spider-Man cartoon on Disney, you're probably not putting that in front of your 6 to 10-year-old. You look at X-Men 97. While X-Men 97 was not overly adult, tossed a few curse words in there, put a little more sexual themes, a little more blood than the 90s cartoon did. And then the DCU recently launched, and we had Creature Commandos, which were about as R-rated as you get. I mean, excessive violence, lots of sex, lots of cussing in there. You throw in the fact that comic books have kind of gone from really what more a PG approach to you're at the very least PG-13, maybe more bordering on R. I think this is a huge problem. I think we're leaving the generation behind that would attach this stuff. And I know people say, well, read, kids are in video games and all this stuff now. Even in the video game front, we're doing stuff like Kill the Justice League that's overly violent. I know there's stuff like Marvel Rivals that kids play, but it just feels like they've decided to kind of leave kids behind on this. Mike, what are your thoughts on it? Do you agree? Do you disagree? How do you think Marvel and DC have handled this overall?
Um, the late great Darwin Cook was also, concerned about it. Anybody with a real set of eyes understands that. Yeah, we had this big comic book movie boom from the industry for about 20 years. And comic books since the 90s have been written for an older audience. Darwin Cook always lamented on the fact that we were leaving the kids behind, and he went on crusades at both Marvel and DC to try and change that. Because you realize how short-sighted it is. Once this generation's gone, then where's the industry going to be going for the next generation? And this is a multi-generational thing, how comic books are. And the funny thing is that you don't have to curse or have sex or have extreme violence in
Violence.
comics to tell a good story. And that's the thing that always misses me. Like, those seem to be like shortcuts to appeal to the a base of fan, but you really have to concentrate on opening the market up to the younger kids. And you can still tell great stories that adults like just as much without all that stuff. And you can encourage the next generation to become comic book fans like we are and grow up with these things. I understand a lot of parental reservations on stuff like this. And maybe we're having a societal shift where it is kind of concerning where these younger kids are playing things like GTA
Yeah.
and all this other stuff that is filled with stuff that we really wouldn't like our kids to see. But what I think it boils down to, and the movie industry does this a lot too, sex and violence sells, and you put that in a movie and you're going to get a big hit. You put that in comics and a lot of adults are going to buy it, but you're going to leave the kids by the wayside, and we need them. And it's such a fun thing for parents and kids to share together. The whole culture, the cosplay, the conventions, the movies, and of course our beloved comic books, which is the wellspring from all of that. It's just such good family fun to enjoy these characters. And I don't believe in my heart of hearts that our mainstream legacy characters have to fall down that uh, have to go down that road, especially when we have these amazing independent comic book publishers who can tackle all those adult themes and invent completely new characters, which is what they seem like they really want to do. Leave the legacy characters alone and let Spidey be Spidey and Soups be Soups, and just have fun with those characters in their true form. And newsflash, adults and kids alike will both love it.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things I would tackle on the top with this stuff because I have seen some people who go, well, kids are different. They see worse things online. I don't really care. As a parent, um, Marvel targets my kids. DC targets my kids from the outset. Diapers, sippy cups, little people, all these figures from toddlers. I mean, there's Batman teethers and Superman teethers and Spider-Man bath toys and little biscuit sticks, biter biscuits with the Hulk on the package. I mean, they target children. They do go, hey, we are a children's company. That is what you have presented yourself as. You market it as such. I should be able to, with a cartoon, put on a Spider-Man cartoon for a kid and be like, that's okay for him to watch. Instead, it's not even like, oh, well, there's overtly political messaging or something, which I'm not going to open that can of worms. But what I would look at it as, you can't even keep the language to a minimum anymore. You can't even keep just the easy, obvious things that I'm going to go, what are we doing here? And the thing is, we've seen this happen with what happens to companies when you alienate kids. And this is why I was so shocked that Creature Commandos was so over the toply rated R. DC, when Marvel Studios happened, they made PG-13 movies that were perfect because they never even pushed really the borderlines of PG-13. It was a little over PG, but you could easily take your 6 or 7 year old to most MCU movies, and there wasn't really going to be any part that you had to cover their eyes. DC decided this dark, morose, depressing Superman getting skewered at the end of the movie while Batman's torturing him with kryptonite and you saw what that did to kids. It drove them away. They didn't want the families weren't taking their kids to those movies. They made money, but not the way Marvel did. And go down the toy aisle of anything now, and you see Groot and Rocket and Cap and Iron Man and Spider-Man, and DC's kind of relegated to just Batman stuff, maybe the occasional Superman thing. And we saw that DC took the approach of no, we're the dark, gritty, adult-oriented thing, and that universe died on the vine. And the whole thing that's crazy is, like you said, we have these indies that for us, I think what's happened is we have selfishly, as older fans, decided, oh, I like these indie books. Why can't we make Superman more like Spawn? Why can't we make Batman more like, the Savage Dragon or whatever these other Image comics that came out? We want the adult stuff getting into these things. And what's happened is you can't hand your average Batman comic book to a kid. You can't your Spider-Man maybe, but even those issues not so much. When you've got like I remember when the New 52 came out, that was really the flashpoint for me of like, oh man, we've gone too far. And then like Detective Comics #1 came out, the New 52, and it ends with the Joker taking a razor blade and slicing the skin off of his face. You had Red Hood and the Outlaws had like overly aggressive sexualization of Starfire, with stuff when you're like, what are we doing? And you go, oh, it's got a teen plus thing on it and whatever. These are comic books with DC and Marvel, which are ostensibly kids brands. And I think that's the big mistake we're making is what they've decided is, and I think it's a lack of writing talent, to be honest. Paul Dini and the guys who did those, Bruce Timm, the DCAU, that had adult storytelling but told in a children's medium. Where if you're an adult and you watch Batman the animated series, you were like, man, that was deep, but it was still a cartoon. What they've decided is now is we can't really write like that, so let's just stab someone. Let's just throw a sex scene in. Let's throw a couple cuss words in. And the weirdest thing is, like, comic books, they kind of seem to throw in curse words and different things. I remember like 80s movies always remind me of this. There's a lot of 80s movies. Whenever you watch an action comedy in the 80s, it's like someone just invented the F word. Because like
Yeah,
all these 80s action comedies, someone told them like we need to throw this word in every other sentence, even when it doesn't make sense. And
it's
I feel like
because
that's
the
what we've seen with
R
the adult stuff in comic books.
it was because the R rating got more box office. So
Mhm.
they would throw in gratuitous stuff to make sure they got the R rating, just
Yeah,
for
and
the
it's just
fun of it.
the saddest thing is, as an adult, we have alternatives for this. That's what Image does, and what a lot of these other comic books companies can do is, I don't really need it in my comics, but if you really need gratuitous sex and violence in your comic books, there's Image for that. That's what they do. That's why that company exists. I don't know why we're trying to pull that stuff into Marvel and DC. And what disturbs me more than anything is it doesn't even seem like the pendulum is swinging back. Because now Marvel's doing this push of like every month there's a red band comic now that's polybagged because it's got excessive violence. And so like we're doing a Daredevil comic. I guess it's Elektra as Daredevil, and it's a red band comic with excessive stuff in it that kids can't read. And our main summer event, Blood Hunt, is going to also be polybagged because of excessive violence. We're going to put Jonathan Hickman and Greg Capullo in a Wolverine comic book when there's a huge Wolverine movie in theaters, and that's going to be polybagged for the red band version because of excessive violence. And it's like we seem to be even going in the further direction the wrong way. And I think that's what's so disturbing is it's not so much, look, I get it. Kids are going to hear cursing. I don't care about that though. As a parent, I would say, look, if I put on Disney Plus and there's a Spider-Man cartoon, I shouldn't have to worry that in the trailer we got bad guys being like, look at this guy in his dumbass costume. And that's the trailer. You put that in the 2 minutes to get me to try to watch it. And it's like I should be able to, as a parent with younger kids, be like, it's a Spider-Man cartoon on Disney Plus. We should be good.
Well,
Instead, they're pushing it where you can't.
I would like to say that I'm going to put my stack down. Um, you're right that they target the younger kids. So busy young parents these days, they have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old kids, and the family has a Disney subscription, and kids love cartoons, and so they're watching Spider-Man, and mom or dad goes about their business. Here they are, they're watching Spider-Man, and they're like 3, 4 years old. They're in their Spider-Man diapers with their Spider-Man sippy cup, and they're they're watching
And they
Spider-Man.
click on the wrong
As a parent,
Spider-Man
you're like,
cartoon.
what could go wrong? And next thing you know, at the dinner table, little Johnny's saying, F you and your dumbass, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, where did that come
Where
from?
did that come from?
But more, that's just weird. But anyways, these characters are meant to be aspirational. And I would argue now more than ever with our kids experiencing a lot of violence in the news and certainly the video games. Wouldn't it be nice to have a little corner of your media, which is these comic books that you could pull out and you could read at the end of a busy day with your little one and not worry, and you get a good solid Spider-Man story that dad could enjoy, mom could enjoy, and little junior could enjoy. That's just good, clean, aspirational fun, and tells good stories just like they used to in the old days. I mean, Marvel in the 60s, here's my little history corner thing, really banked on an older audience of college age young adults. And so they upped their theme to be a little more adult. But they were still solid, good stories. There's nothing in there. Although some themes may have been over the head of a 6-year-old, the
You
basic
could hand
plot,
your average Spider-Man to any
yeah,
kid and it'd be fine.
it served both points, just like Pixar did masterfully in all of their animated films. I love that Pixar era, bringing my
Like
kids
Toy
to go
Story and
see.
Cars and yeah.
Yeah, and it was just, there was adult stuff there that flew over the heads of the kids, but it was never violent, negative. Um, I don't know, what are we doing here? And if we don't have that little niche of media to give our kids, I think we're missing out on the potential, because we want these kids to grow up and have this medium and give it to their kids. I think it's storytelling, like you said, Reed.
I think the big thing is the loss of this is it's the loss as a parent of the trust in these companies. I would have told you 10, when because I got a teenager and I got a toddler. Um, when my teenager was younger, I inherently would have trusted Marvel and DC. If there's a cartoon, of course you can watch it. It's Batman, it's Superman, it's gonna be fine. If my toddler, he's like 3-ish now. It's like, no, man, I gotta screen the content that you're watching. And again, part of that's your as a parent, you should probably do that anyway. But the thing is, like, I hate that. Like, I see him click on a Spider-Man thing on YouTube, and I go, which Spider-Man? Which one? I gotta make sure it's the right one. I gotta make sure it's not the overly excessive Spider-Man thing I don't want you to watch. And I even think in the superhero movies, and this is where, the Deadpool movies I've always had a conflicted relationship with, in that I understand Deadpool has always been a little bit more violent of a character. However, I would say if you go back and read the original appearances of Deadpool, it's not an R-rated comic book. The movie has greatly exaggerated the R-rated nature of Deadpool. And while I have enjoyed those movies, I'll be honest, I sat and I watched Deadpool and Wolverine, and as a massive Wolverine fan, and as someone who has bought Wolverine action figures, and my kids like Wolverine because I like Wolverine, and they've had Wolverine toys, I sat there and I enjoyed it, but I also had a tremendous amount of guilt that here we go with the first live action Wolverine, where he's in the costume and he's in all of it. And it's like, man, y'all are both like a decade away from being able to watch this movie. Like, we're not even close. This isn't like when you're 10. This is going to be, you got to be older, right? And I think that I'm not going to tell anybody how to parent or what to do, but I just think for Marvel and DC, again, when you market your brands as we are a kid-friendly brand, and then you have this paradigm shift with some of your properties, it doesn't make any sense, especially because you don't need. I think they don't need to. Like, I'll even go with like Christopher Nolan's Batman movies, right? Those were dark. But the thing with those films is they were PG-13, and honestly, you could show that to like a 10-year-old and they'll be fine. Maybe your 4 or 5-year-old, probably not. But, most people are going to be able to watch that at a young age, and there's not going to be anything too scary in the Nolan trilogy of Batman films. Those didn't lack for adult content. Those didn't lack for anything where you're like, this is immature or stupid. But it understood the balance of, hey, we don't need to have a bunch of F-bombs in this movie. We don't need to have Bane get his face blown off and gratuitously show the blood spewing out. We can present the violence in a way where, yes, it's more serious and it's more grounded. But you can still show this to most people. And if you could watch network television, you could watch this. And I just think Marvel and DC are both creeping up. And I'll be honest, this is the worry I have with James Gunn. And that James Gunn has tackled 3 DC properties now: Peacemaker, The Suicide Squad, and Creature Commandos. All of them have been extremely R rated. And not like kinda, not, oh, there was a little more cursing and violence. These are over the top R rated things. And when you're going to try to build an integrated universe of storytelling, the dumbest thing I think you can do is, hey, it's going to start in this Creature Commandos thing, but you're a kid, you can't watch that. That's got sex, violence, and all kinds of stuff I don't want you seeing. But you can watch the Superman movie that's in the DCU. Oh, but then Peacemaker's in the DCU. Can't watch that. Even though it's going to be referenced in these things, I can't let you watch that because that's got all kinds of R-rated content. And that was where the MCU was brilliant, was the MCU integrated all of this stuff together, and it had where every single MCU movie I could sit my reasonably aged kid down in front of between like 6 and 10 They could watch every movie and they were good. DC is already from its inception being like half our properties, you got to be an adult to watch. And the other half, you're not. Now we're going to connect everything. And that's just, I think that's another huge problem is like when the kids see Deadpool, like my toddler, he sees Deadpool. He sees a costume superhero who looks kind of like Spider-Man. And it's like, no, 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 don't click on that thing. Don't watch Deadpool. You can't watch Deadpool. Anything with Deadpool, you can't watch. And it's like, and I get it. Maybe it's a 3-year old, it's a 4-year old, it's a 5-year old. They shouldn't be controlled. I can get all those arguments. But yeah, I just wonder why is it that Marvel and DC have decided this is the path to present
and,
that because they don't need to. There are other companies that could do that.
and above and beyond the moral parenting uh, thing about this is the fact that these stories don't have to have that to be good, and we keep coming back to that. But a good story is a good story is a good story, and you don't have to have all that in there to make a successful story. And I don't know. I feel like DC at some point in the early 2000s, well, they harnessed all of their dark power. And they just said, we're just going to go all in on the adults and squeeze the sale out of the adult market. And that's fine, I guess. But the reality is that, if you leave the kids in the dust, you're not going to have a market in the future. Um,
Well, it
and
just
it's
seems like
heartbreaking.
inherent selfishness from current age fans who have decided, you know what? Nah, man, kids don't need to read this. I need the books to grow with me. And so the books have gone. And I think that's the thing is where I've always liked comic books. I could give a rip if there's any cussing or a mature storytelling in the comic books as far as me personally. It doesn't enhance the story for me at all that you just threw a couple cuss words in. In fact, I kind of look at it as like ridiculous when you go and go with like, oh, it's all serious and grounded. And at the end of the day, look, I love Batman. He's my favorite character of all time. He is still a dude wearing his underwear on the outside in a bat-themed costume, jumping off rooftops. There's a level of seriousness this that just is never going to be there. And I am okay accepting that because what I have always looked at comic books as is it's this cool blast from the past that connects to great memories of my childhood that I still get to occasionally on every Wednesday dive in for 10 to 15 minutes and check in on how all these characters I like from my childhood that I've cared about my whole life are doing. It's not life or death. It's not, but that's a cool thing for me. And I used to love the idea that like you could share that with your kids. I have so many great memories of going to the comic book store with my dad and him buying, a little stack of comics, 5 or 6 comic books, and throwing them down and flipping through the pages of Fantastic Four and the Hulk and Spider-Man. And I don't ever remember my dad having to censor content for me or be like, well, I can't let you keep this one, or oh shoot, not that one. And I feel like if I took my kid into the comic book store as a 6-year-old now, I'm going to be able to pick up basically nothing for him. I'm either going to have to hand him the kiddie Disney cartoon comic books that they do with like DuckTales or Darkwing Duck, maybe Scooby Doo and Batman. But if he's grown past that, it's like, well, you're not quite ready to read these, and you're really not ready to read those. And so I guess I'm going to go back to the Golden Age comics, or I'm going to go back to the early Marvel stuff. And it's just sad because I feel like in a selfish desire to try to make the medium match the adults, we have changed the medium to where the entry point of reading Batman, Spider-Man, Superman, etc. is 10 to 12 years old, 14 years old at least, somewhere around there, instead of 4, 5, 6. And again, like you said, there used to be stuff in these things that would fly over the head of a 4, 5, or 6-year old, but it wasn't so explicitly in the book that it was like, oh, the kid, if he doesn't get it, isn't going to get the book. I think like one of the best examples, right? There's the Steranko Nick Fury, right, where they hint in that I think what's the third or fourth issue of Nick Fury Shield, where they hint that Nick Fury
The
hooked
phone
up with
off
the
the hook.
girl. Yeah,
Yeah.
the phone off, right? And
Yeah.
as an adult, you read that, you see the image, you know exactly what Steranko is going for there. As a
Yeah.
kid, you'd read it and go like, "Oh, it's gun holsters on the couch." Like, I, you read that book and it's like, yeah, there's gun holsters on the couch. Like, oh, he kissed the girl.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's smart. That's smart storytelling, and Steranko was definitely going for an older audience. but he knew what he had to do, and it's good stories. Good stories are good stories are good stories. You don't have to have all this edgy. Ooh, my comics has
especially out of
three F
Marvel or
words in
DC.
it. Yours only has two. Mine's more edgy.
Well, and then I'll be honest, one of the other ones that annoys the heck out of me, and Tom King does this more than any writer. He'll have the like Batman comic where he can't use the curse word, but he wants the characters to curse. So we'll have like five of the like, all the asterisk, but
Yeah,
hashtag, all that stuff,
yeah,
all the little things there in the sentence. It's like, really? This is what we're doing? Like, I wanted to cuss, but I can't in this comic. So I'm gonna it's like just be more cognizant of what these characters are. It's okay. And again, I think the huge push of this is as much as we revere them as legends, a lot of this is on Frank Miller and a lot of this is on Alan Moore. For
yeah. They brought it.
they brought that into it. Although I would say it's on them, but it's also on us as audience members who ate that stuff up and said it was great and said it's the greatest comic books ever. And I just, we've gone too far away from the intended audience of these things. And I wish we would pull it back more to where comics were appropriate for 6 to 10 year olds instead of going, 10 to 16 or 12 to 18. But let us know. What do you guys think below? Do you think the medium of comic books and comic book superheroes has swung too far in the wrong direction? Do you think it's alienated kids? And if you were in charge of Marvel or DC, what would you do to try to turn that around, or would you even attempt it? Let us know what you guys think below. Before we go, Mike and I are just going to run through what is in our stacks for the week, what we picked up at the store. So, Mike, I will kick it to you, sir. What did you pick up this week?
I haven't read it yet, but there was some good um, retro comics in there. Of course, we talked about this Challenge of the Unknown. I just finished reading Flash Gordon #5, which is awesome. I love that Flash Gordon. And speaking of our topic, here's a story.
All ages
I don't,
comic.
yeah, I don't think there's anything adult in there, but still a good story for adults to enjoy. I'm reading the last issue of Tokyo Nexus. I'm just a few pages in, but loving my Blade Runner. Also reading this Blast from the Past is so cool. Did you know? I forgot they're in Central City.
Yeah, I think, yeah, in that first issue,
Flash
yes. Yeah.
fans in Central City. What? And of course, my Flash comic B cover.
This week, a couple good books came out. Let's see, Batman and Robin 17. Philip Kennedy Johnson's done a really good job on that book, so I've enjoyed that one so far. Um, Ultimate Black Panther to number 12 picks that up, kind of culminating the first year of that story. Not the greatest issue. I thought it was still a well-written comic book, but there's a lot of build-up for this Black Panther versus Moon Knight fight in this book, and it kind of ended in like 2 pages. And I'm like, I guess it's okay, but I would have liked to have seen like maybe a whole issue of those
Yeah.
two duking it out. It just felt like a little bit too much decompression of like, it's a comic book. Can we please see some cool action scenes? And it felt like they didn't want to give us that. But overall, not awful. I still like the book, just a bit disappointing. Best two books I read this week. Geiger number 10, Ghost Machine. You and I are going to do a video on them soon. This publisher is just doing an incredible job. Geiger, Red Coat, Rook Exodus. I think even that Rockefeller's book is good. And I'll say this, there's two books they've had, Hornsby and Halo, and I think it's called Hyde Street. Not books for me. I didn't enjoy them. But I will say, that's just my personal taste. They're not bad comic books. They're well written, they're well drawn. It's just books that were never going to appeal to me. But I mean, they're just knocking it out of the park. But book I was happiest to see on the stand this week. Aquaman #1. Now I don't know why this didn't come out 2 years ago when they launched a huge $250 million movie, but Jeremy Adams, I think this is, what is it, John Timms on the art. Fantastic comic, just
I
proving
tried
that,
to get one. They were sold out.
yeah, hopefully you can get the second printing. I think they've already announced the second printing on it. Or of course I'll let you borrow mine. But just further proof that Jeremy Adams is, I think, the new Jeff Johns. He is the guy that you
I
can
think so
put on
too.
these DC characters, Aquaman, Green Lantern, Flash. I mean, he's already hitting a bunch of the Jeff Johns characters already, but he
He
seems
started
to
off with the
understand the
Flash.
characters, present them as competent, cool, classic adventures that whether you've read the book constantly or you've dropped out for 5 or 10 years, this was just a really fun comic with a great kind of cliffhanger ending to it. of the all-in books that they've launched, that by far was the strongest number one issue to me. Really good to see that. Great to see Aquaman, a character back on the stands who should pretty much always have a comic
Case
book.
in point, Jeremy Adams always writes a decent down the
Yeah,
middle of
no,
the road story.
from his Flash comic book, that Wally run was
Yeah,
fantastic. It kind of had like almost an Incredibles type of vibe to it with a family book.
no problem giving that one to my kids.
Green Lantern has at times gone a little bit more than Flash, but still would really fall well with. I'd have no problem with my kids reading it. And this first Aquaman issue was just absolutely fantastic. So, and then yeah, his Flash Gordon, as you point out, Flash Gordon 5, another book
Good,
that's
clean
really
fun.
and then I hope we see more writers like Jeremy Adams at DC. I think
Me too.
he's the writer right now that's getting into that Jeff Johns, Jonathan Hickman kind of thing, where his name putting on a book for me at least is like, I don't care what character it is, if Jeremy Adams is writing it, I'm at least checking out the first arc.
Yeah.
He's really doing really well. As always, folks, let us know what you guys think below. What is in your stack? What are you reading for this week? Thank you so much for watching. Hope you're enjoying the football playoffs, the NFL, and college. Have a great weekend. God bless you. We'll catch you in the next video.
Thanks, everybody.